It cost me a lot, but there's one thing that I've got. It's my man. Cold and wet, tired, you bet, but all that I'll soon forget with my man. He's not much for looks and no hero out of books is my man. 2 or 3 girls has he that he loves as well as me, but I love him. I don't know why I should. He isn't good, he isn't true, he beats me too. What can I do? Oh, my man, I love him so. He'll never know all my life is just despair. But I don't care when he takes me in his arms. The world is right, all right. What's the difference if I say I'll go away when I know that I'll come back on my knees someday? For whatever my man is, I'm his forevermore. What's the difference if I say I'll go away when I know that I'll come back on my knees someday? For whatever my man is, I'm his forever. Thank you. And now, let's bring back Mr. Hughes.
Professor, my song, if you please. It had to be you. It had to be you. I wandered around and finally found somebody who could make me be blue, could make me be true, and even be glad just to be sad, thinking of you. some others I've seen might never be mean, might never be cross or try to be boss, but they wouldn't do. No, nobody else gave me a thrill. With all of your faults, I love you still. It had to be you, wonderful you. It had to be you. Thank you. Thank you. I have always enjoyed the good company of women. And it is my observation with women that when they say no, they generally mean yes. My first wife divorced me because I was never around. Well, actually, I was very busy working at the time. And Ginger Rogers, Kate Hepburn became a wonderful, wonderful friend. We parted amiably. And Ginger Rogers is the only girl that ever broke my heart. She dropped me when she found out I was playing around with other women. I really missed her. Lana Turner is probably the most statuesquely beautiful woman I think I've ever seen. And Ava Gardner had the same birthday as me. And when she departed, she hit me over the head with a champagne bottle. She made by far the most lasting impression. And Terry Moore, I can sum up in a very simple song. Everybody loves a baby, that's why I'm in love with you. Pretty baby, pretty baby. And I'd like to be your sister, brother, dad, and mother too. Pretty baby, pretty baby. Won't you come and let me rock you in my cradle of love? And we'll cuddle all the time. Oh, I want a loving baby, and it might as well be you. Pretty baby of mine. Pretty baby of mine. Pretty baby. Now, where was I? Oh, yes. Jean Peters will always be Miss Jean to me. I have nothing but the highest of respect for her integrity. And it's a funny thing that Jean Peters and Terry Moore both happened to be married at one time to a fella named Stuart Kramer III. And I suppose to me, believe it or not. Shall we? Pack up all my cares and woes, here I go, singing low. Bye-bye, blackbird, where somebody waits for me, sugar sweet, and so is she. Bye-bye, blackbird, no one here can help or understand me, and oh, what hard luck stories they all hand me. So make my bed and light the light, I'll be home late tonight, blackbird, bye-bye. Now, as difficult as it may be to believe, I was once arrested for vagrancy. I was in the South during the war, wasn't doing a damn thing wrong. I was standing around this gas station about 2 o'clock in the morning trying to keep out of the rain. I was calmly eating my cupcakes and drinking a quart of milk. Well, this cop comes along in his car and he says, "What are you doing here?" Well, it seemed pretty obvious, so I ignored him. The next thing I knew, he just grabbed me and threw me in the back of his car. Now, I never in my life have I ever heard of anybody getting arrested for eating cupcakes, drinking milk before. So I says to him, "Well, you stupid hick country cop, don't you know who I am?" He says, "No, who are you?" I said, "Well, I'm Howard Hughes." He says, oh. He says, have you got any ID? I said, no, I don't ever carry any with me. He says, how about money? I said, no, I don't ever carry any money with me. He says, all right. He says, I'm arresting you for vagrancy. He says, if you're Howard Hughes, I'm Shirley Temple. Well, I asked him how he liked dancing with Bojangles Robinson, and he threw me in jail. Oh, yeah. He always sings raggedy music to the cattle as he swings back and forth in the saddle on a horse who is syncopated, gated, and he sets a funny meter to the roar of his repeater. How they run, oh how they run, oh when they hear this fella coming, 'cause the western folks all know he's a highfalutin, rootin', tootin' son of a gun from Arizona, ragtime cowboy. You talk about your cowboy, ragtime cowboy Joe. Now I got interested in making a movie about the outlaw, about Billy the Kid, because of a fascination I have for westerns. Once again, the director and I had various disagreements, until finally it became necessary for me to take over the direction of the film. He told me that if I was so smart, I should direct it myself, which I did. He went off to direct some movie called Sergeant York. The movie made a big star out of a young lady named Jane Russell, and it also starred Jack Butel. I liked Jack Butel because he reminded me an awful lot of me, and Jane Russell, I signed her to $1 million contract. I knew that she was worth making into a star at that point, the first time I ever saw her. Now, in this film, it also had Thomas Mitchell and Walter Houston. And there were many retakes on this film. And the only ones that ever complained were Houston and Mitchell. But they weren't used to 25 or 30 takes for a scene. But I'm a perfectionist. Now, at the time of the premiere of the movie, I wanted to make a cut in the third reel. So I called down to the projectionist that was showing the first reel, and I said, bring me down the third reel, I need to make a cut in it. And he said, it's impossible because we're already showing the first reel. I said, I don't care, bring me down the film. And he brought me down the film, and I made the cut in it and got it back just in time at the end of the second reel. Now, the initial response by the reviewers to this film was negative. So I decided at this point to build up a big publicity stunt. Told everybody I designed a special bra for Jane Russell to wear in this film, and that it had been banned due to the eroticness of Jane Russell's breasts and a few other scenes, such as her getting into bed with Billy the Kid to keep him warm. Yes. Well, all of this is an example of how to build up interest in a film and to capitalize on censorship, and it worked. People all across the country were talking about The Outlaw. They were saying, what are the two biggest things about The Outlaw? Mr. George S. Kaufman, the noted playwright and critic, made the comment, called this film A Sale of Two Titties. Well, I work at odd hours, and 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning is a very good time for me. I work best undisturbed, and it gives me time to think things out clearly. And I take a great interest in my company. Now, there was only one time I can remember when there was a strike at Hughes Aircraft, and it was after the war, and all of the strikers were new people. And they all went to the one side of the plant, and they said that they were not going to go back to work until they got a large pay raise. Now, I expect a day's work for a day's pay, so I walked up to these guys and I said, now listen, either you men go back to work right now, or I'll shut this plant down. Now, that's how you end a strike. Now, one time a couple of fellas named Rockefeller and Zeckendorf were interested in buying my company, and I love to wheel and deal. So I had these men met by my Chevrolet, a green Chevrolet, and taken to a real seedy section of town, to a flop house, so that we could negotiate. I wanted to show these guys what the other half lived like. So I brought them in and sat them down, and I says, all right, gentlemen, I'm ready to hear your offer. So they says, well, $350 million. I said, $350 million? That's not enough. They said, well, what is enough? I said, well, the price that you might offer me. If it's enough, I will take it. So they said, $450 million. I said, no. They said, $500 million. Take it or leave it. I said, okay, I'll leave it. Now, I really didn't have any intention of selling in the first place. I just want to see how much I was worth. Well, in 1942, the war was going strong, and the Germans were sinking hundreds of our ships. And a fellow named Henry J. Kaiser came up with the idea of building giant cargo seaplanes so that we could fly over the submarines. Well, I didn't care very much for the idea, but he was very, very persuasive. And after a while, I became involved. The government awarded $18 million for this project, specifying that this be made out of materials that were not vital to the war. Wood was the most available material. Now, an aircraft as colossal in size as this had never been attempted before. There were delays, setbacks, and even sabotage, and it was to consume 5 years of my life, and all the problems hadn't been worked out until after the war was over. I had a great deal of pressure on me, and needless to say, the way I handled pressure was to fly. So I just quietly disappeared, and I flew around for almost a year doing nothing that required much thought. Now, one time I was flying across the country with my friend Glenn Oatkirk, and we landed in this Army base because I needed to make a telephone call to the company. So we get off, and we get on this sidecar, this motorcycle. He commandeered it, sort of commandeered it. And we get up to the front gate, and this great big fat sergeant stands there, and he says, nobody get off this base without an ID. And I don't ever carry an identification with me. So I said, Odie, I said, tell this guy who I am. So Odie told him about 4 times who I was. And he says, I don't give a good goddamn who he is. He ain't getting off this base without an ID. He don't get off this base without an ID. Well, I finally said, all right, Odie, turn around. And we went back to the plane. And when we got back to the plane, I gave Odie some very specific instructions. I said, I want you to go back to the front gate, to the same guard. And when you see that I am airborne, I want you to point at the plane and tell him that your boss just got off this base without an ID. Thank you. I like that story, too. What am I going to say here? Oh, yes. In addition to the flying boat, I also received a contract for a photo reconnaissance plane. It was very futuristic in design, and it was called the XF-11. Now, as is the case with all aircraft designed by my company, I personally flew this aircraft. I didn't want everybody else to have all the fun. Well, about an hour and a half into the test, because the original instructions were only be flying it for 45 minutes, one of the double props on it began to spin in the opposite direction. It caused me to crash into a beautiful area of Bel Air. I don't remember very much about the crash, except a Marine sergeant named Durkin saved my life. He came out and he pulled my broken body away from the ship and placed me up against a tree. And he said that he was going to go get help. And about this time, a fireman came along. So he says to the fireman, he says, hey, come on over here and give me a hand. And the fireman says, well, wait a minute until I get a hose. Now, the United States Marines have a way with words. So he says, how in the hell can anybody be that goddamn stupid? I got a poor man here about to burn to death. Now get your ass over here. Well, I don't remember very much about the hospital except When I was admitted, I sat up and said, "I'm Howard Hughes, this good-looking blonde nurse." And then I passed out. Now, the result of my injuries were my heart had been pushed from one side to the other. My lungs had been crushed severely. Almost every bone that could have been broken had been. Needless to say, I was in a great deal of pain. I never cared very much for hospitals anyway. And during my early convalescence, I found time to design a bed that would allow greater movement by an individual. I never got to use the bed because my hospital stay was not of long duration. But it's a hell of a nice little bed. It's out in some storehouse somewhere. Now, I attribute my recovery to having consumed large amounts of vitamin C in the form of freshly squeezed oranges. I did, however, develop a constant need for medication. Now, I believe that medication with time will alter a person's perception and cause great harm in the long run. At this time, I became much more of a recluse and became much more aware of germs because of my weak body. It became accessible to germs. And I was never quite the same after this crash. I never fully recovered from this crash. Well, anyway, about 1947, there was a fellow named Brewster. He was a senator from Maine. Now, he had it in for me. He wanted to get publicity so that he could become vice president or some other higher office. Senator Owen Brewster, S.O.B. for short, instigated a Senate hearing into my affairs saying that I'd misappropriated $18 million on the flying boat. Would you buy a used car from this man? Now, Johnny Meyer was a PR man who worked for me. He testified before the committee saying various things that were business practices, such as entertaining Army officers with women and parties. And, well, frankly, it didn't look very good. Now, it's a hellish situation for a man to appear before a Senate investigating committee along with charges of bribery. And I was literally on trial. I planned my defense very meticulously. I was delayed in my appearance because I flew all night and I was tired. And I was duly sworn in. And I said, yes, Senator, I can hear better if I hold the earphone up to my ear. Everybody knows I'm deaf. I don't try to hide it. Charges? Well, I specifically charge that during a luncheon at the Mayflower Hotel, Senator Brewster, in so many words, told me that if I would agree to merge my company with Pan American Airways and go along with him on his community airline bill, there wouldn't be any hearings investigating my business activities. What's that, Senator? You say it sounds more like Hollywood than Washington. Well, yes, Senator, I have questions I want to ask of Senator Brewster. I have over 200 of them. And it is unfair to have my integrity questioned and not be allowed to cross-examine Senator Brewster. Now, yesterday you told me I would be afforded the same privilege as the senator from Maine or anyone else here. Now, will you give me the questions in advance that you want to ask of me while I am here? There were cheers and applause. Thank you. Well, the committee finally answered my questions of Brewster, and he admitted knowing various company officials and accepting gratuities from Pan American. He was long recognized as the kept senator of Pan American Airways, and he avoided answering most of the questions. Then it became my turn to speak. So I got up and I said, the American public has witnessed two men getting up here under oath and telling two different stories which are quite contrary to the other. Now, I believe in deciding which one of us is telling the truth, our reputations should be examined, at least to some extent. Now, I may be a little unkind in my appraisal of Senator Brewster's reputation, but rest assured I shall be equally unkind in the appraisal of my reputation. Now, I understand that Senator Brewster has a reputation of being clever, resourceful, a terrific public speaker, a man who can hold an audience in the palm of his hand, and who has a reputation of being one of the great trick shot artists in Washington. Now, let us examine my reputation. I am supposed to be capricious. I am called a playboy. I have been called eccentric. I am supposed to be many things which are not complimentary, but I don't believe that I have the reputation of being a liar. Now, I feel that Senator Brewster is not telling the truth. If I can be allowed to cross-examine him, I think that I can prove it. If I don't have that right, I'd like to drop the matter right at this point. Well, it's a funny thing. Senator Brewster removed himself from the proceedings and flew back to Maine. The next day, the committee's first topic of discussion were the business activities of Johnny Meyer, my PR man. Well, I said, well, all of the aircraft companies are doing the same thing. Seemed silly for me to ignore the government and officials. If you can make a law that says no company can entertain Army officers and you can enforce it, I will be glad to abide by it. I never wanted to work this way to begin with. But do I know where Mr. Meyer is? No, there are 28,000 employees in my company. Do I know where everybody is every day? Now, you had Meyer here for unlimited questioning. I'm not going to bring him back here so you can have some big publicity show. I think my company has been inconvenienced just about long enough. Well, I see to it he's here for the 2 o'clock session. What, today? No. I don't think I will. No, Senator, I don't think I'll try. And as to the flying boat and the delays, I put the sweat of my life into this thing. I have my reputation on the line. I put $7 million of my own money into this. And I've stated many times that if it doesn't fly, I'll probably give up my citizenship and leave this country, and I mean it. Well, on the 6th day, the committee called the hearings to an end. And on the 7th day, I rested. Does anybody here have any questions you want to ask while I am here? Is Melvin Dumar here tonight? No questions? Everybody wants to go home, huh? No questions? Ah, a voice in the darkness. No, not really. I was never interested too much in the ocean. The closest to that, I think I've come to that, would be Glomar. Glomar was originally designed to be a ship that would mine undersea materials and minerals. It was never used for that. They used it to dig out some Russian ship. Submarine, I think it was. I had very little control over it at the time because the CIA had infiltrated my company to an extent, almost completely. But no, I never really had any oceanographic adventures. Never been asked that before. Anymore. No. Thank you. Jane Russell is a lovely, lovely woman. I won't say I didn't try to make a pass, but she was married at the time, and, you know, husbands get upset over things like that. One fellow knocked me down one time, gave me a black eye. I didn't like it. So I try to keep out of the way of things like that. Anything else? Well, I have a television network, the HUGHES network, sports network. We put up the first early bird satellite. That had a great deal to do with television communications. The company has been involved in television communications for a good many years. But I've always felt like I would have liked to have produced a television show, but I never really had the time, and I don't think I was healthy enough to do it. This is, yeah, whatever. Anything else? Oh, well, amorous thoughts, memories. I think that people have to do whatever they do. I think she looks pretty good. You know, nice looking woman. What can I say? Do what you have to do, and that's where it's at. I really don't have any bad feelings. She always had a nice figure. Still does. No, I don't think there was any mental abuse. Well, I covered that earlier. She divorced me mainly because I wasn't around. And we lived together at the Beverly Hills Hotel for quite a while in Bungalow 4. We had different bungalows, but I don't feel as though I contributed to her mental abuse. She probably just got upset because she didn't see enough of me. Anything else? All right. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, what? Oh, that's a bunch of bullshit. I hate to say that, but it's the honest to God truth. First of all, the damn letters. This is the book. Horrible book. Makes me sound like the worst goddamn man that ever lived, for Christ's sake. Nobody takes into consideration that those particular papers were stolen. They were burglarized. Nobody came up to the author and said, hey, look, the guys that stole these papers, they burglarized it and they broke the law. Nobody did anything like that. I'm accused of being a bigot. Well, let me tell you something. I was born in 1905, and damn it, I don't hate anybody. But I was raised in an era where I was afraid of black people. And it wasn't only till about the 1960s they came around with a civil rights bill. And I'm accused of all sorts of different things in that book, that I tried to run the presidency, that I tried to do this, and nobody clearly points out the reason why I tried to influence Nixon was because they wanted the goddamn atomic bomb test stopped 150 miles outside of Las Vegas. Now, who in the hell wants to go to Las Vegas when there's a bunch of damn atomic bombs 150 miles away being blown up? It's killing business, so to speak. That was my reason for trying to get in control. I also wanted to have my company declared as a medical corporation so that tax-free. And I did eventually, and that's a very good business move. Not all business moves are necessarily good moves. They aren't all necessarily proper or honest, but business is business, and we all know business ain't got no heart. That cost me $90 million. I don't want to talk about that. Well, I'll tell you what I did do on that. I underbid. That's why it cost $90 million. It's a lovely little helicopter, though. I think the people in Vietnam called it an eggshell helicopter. More? Well, thank you for asking. I'm going to cover that in just a moment. I'll tell you a little story on it in just a second. Any more questions? All right. Thank you. Let's do Sweetheart. Let me call you sweetheart. I'm in love with you. Let me hear you whisper that you love me too. Keep the love light burning Senate, it became a matter of necessity for me to fly or test the Hughes flying boat. Now, November the 2nd was the date chosen for the preliminary tests in the choppy water of Long Beach. And the press coverage was very, very large. And the press was told that these were only going to be taxi tests through the harbor in Long Beach. Now, to move the parts of the flying boat to the assembly point at Terminal Island was not an easy job. This plane weighs 200 tons, has a wingspan of 320 feet, and it is the largest aircraft ever built. As I said, the press coverage was large, and the press came on for the first 2 taxi tests through the harbor. Then they got off to call in their stories. And it was on a 3rd taxi run through the harbor that I decided to give it full throttle. And when we reached the 100-mile-an-hour mark, the plane, with a slight shudder, rose majestically. She attained an altitude of about 90 feet, and she flew a little over a mile. And then I gently lowered her back onto the sea. Now, this aircraft is, in my opinion, one of the present-day 7 wonders of the world. It has been called a work of art. It's a prototype for a spaceship. I don't build any Cluck airplanes. Now, many people have wondered if I intended to fly this in advance. Some say I was afraid of it. Some say that it flew by accident. Reporters in particular wanted to know if I intended flying it beforehand. I'll tell you the same thing I told them. I like to make surprises. Blue skies smiling at me, nothing but blue skies do I see. Bluebirds singing a song, nothing but bluebirds all day long. Never saw the sun shining so bright, never saw things going so right, noticing the days hurrying by when you're in love. My, how they fly, all blue days, all of them gone. Nothing but blue skies from now on. Play my old one. Aloha, hoy, thou charming one who dwells among the bowers. If you know aloha, hoy, you can sing. One fond embrace before I now depart, until we meet again. Once more, please. Aloha, oi, aloha, oi, thou charming one who dwells among the bowers. One fond embrace before I now depart, until we meet again. Now I'll leave you with this one last thought, ladies and gentlemen. In this day and age, dreams still come true. God bless. Thanks a lot.